All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. It is our monthly 30 by 30 webinar. I'm Tanya Meisenholder, the Director of Gender Equity at the NYU Policing Project, where I oversee the 30 by 30 initiative. Before we get started, just a few reminders. We are recording today. We will have a question and answer section at the end. And if you prefer for us to turn the recording off, we're more than happy to do that. Please remember to keep yourself muted so you don't inadvertently have your conversations exposed to everyone when we post this webinar on the 30 by 30 website next week. And once again, really happy to have you all with us today. We had a lot of requests to hear from individual women trailblazers in the field. And so we're bringing you today, really two, because Yvonne is moderating. Yvonne Roman is 30 by 30 co-founder and is a retired chief from Newark, New Jersey. And she is going to be having a conversation with Gina Hawkins, who is the current president of the National Association of Women Law Enforcement Executives, who we work closely with, and also the assistant deputy sheriff at Cobb County. So Yvonne, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you get started with your conversation with Gina.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Chief Hawkins, for being here with us. It's so important for us to have leaders who we can hold up as examples to women interested in careers in law enforcement. I'm really excited because, as we know personally, often women lack access to traditional career development opportunities. So it's crucial for women aspiring to achieve leadership to see people who have done it and to see how they've navigated that, and to hear varying perspectives on how leadership was achieved during a role model's career. So for today, my Ask Me Anything series is featuring our friend Gina Hawkins, an excellent case study in a chief's career trajectory. She's currently an assistant chief deputy at the Cobb County Sheriff's Office in Georgia, where she oversees uniformed operations, criminal investigations, training, and internal affairs. She's also the former chief of police in the city of Fayetteville, North Carolina, making her the very first female, first African-American, and first Hispanic chief in the Fayetteville history. She's also the current president of NAWLEE, the National Association of Women in Law Enforcement, one of our partners here at 30 by 30. Welcome, Chief. Thanks for making time to be here. We're really excited.
Hello, Yvonne. Thank you, first of all, for having me. I'm excited because it's almost like a behind the scenes of getting to have a conversation with you. As Tanya said, you're a trailblazer also, but also as we think about it, and I was sharing before we came on, I was looking at old pictures and we were in a picture together. I think it might have been like 2017 or 2018 at another event, and now it's 2024. But even before that, watching what you do or watching what our small percentage of women in this profession at different positions, and time goes on and we keep moving and we keep learning and we keep doing a lot of different things. So I'm excited about this behind the scenes conversation, and it's just what it is. It's going to be a conversation of what do you want to ask me? What do you want to ask me?
Cool. So I'm going to start it off with the first question. What are some of the biggest challenges you face as you advance in your law enforcement career, and how did you overcome them?
So I think when I think about that question of what's my biggest challenge, because one, women and its leaders, you got to understand you're going to face challenges. You got to accept that they're going to come. There's nothing that's worth doing that's not going to be hard. But when I really think about it, my biggest challenge, I think, was my own self of either trying to do something without knowledge, without doing the research to be able to do that. And also myself, when I say not preparing myself to believe in myself, doubting myself, not saying I think I can do it or I want to do it, saying, you know what, that's probably not for me. So the own self-doubt. So when I realized I needed to start learning about who I am, what are my habits, or what are my tendencies in leadership, that required me to learn about others. So the biggest challenge was my own self, first and foremost, and not preparing myself early on, or thinking I didn't have to prepare, And then after I overcame that challenge, knowing that I had to be prepared for the barriers that were coming and are there, that are going to keep on coming. So once you start preparing yourself, knowing that barriers are going to try to put themselves up there, that means you start studying, you start learning about the law, you start learning about policies, you start learning about experiences, you start researching what's happening across the nation for your profession. And then you start being okay. You start getting in a niche of like, you know what, challenge is going to come. What's the next one? It's always going to be a learning lesson.
I think that what fuels it is that when we first started, didn't have role models, right? So we didn't know this is how it's done. This is the training that I should take. These are the assignments that I should try to go for. So those are all things that I learned very late in my career, once I started going up the career ladder and trying to figure out how I can get leadership roles. But it wasn't something that was obvious to me, because when I first became a police officer, the highest ranking woman was a lieutenant. So I know exactly what you're saying, and we overqualify ourselves too. We won't apply unless we meet every checkbox. Where a man, if he meets 7 or 8 out of the 11 or 12, he'll sign up. So totally, the research backs that up. So
Yeah.
what motivated you to pursue a career in law enforcement, and how has your perspective of this career evolved over the years?
So truly, when I say I had no idea, I was so naive. I was 20 and I wanted to be an attorney actually. And I took a break from school and said, well, what can I do? I was an athlete. So I'm like, oh, this looks fun. This police academy. Clueless to what law enforcement did, right? Because I didn't grow up around law enforcement. I just thought, oh, TV shows, they're good. You know, I'm good. That was the qualification. I'm good. I want to help people. Oh, I can do that. And this will be fun. This will give me my break before I go back to school to be an attorney. So, because I definitely wanted to defend people, and I believed in the Constitution. I believed in people had rights. So I wanted to do that aspect. I started when I was 20, graduated academy 21. Clueless, so naive. It's almost scary, dangerous, right? But then so in other words, what motivated me? I didn't know. I didn't realize what all this involved. So even back then, I started with the city of Atlanta. City of Atlanta, a large city where civil rights is strongly enforced. We had a lot of women in our organization, but for me, I didn't see that as a mentor component because they weren't accessible to me. So I thought coming on, I had to be the hardest. I had to be just like the men. I had to prepare myself to do this thing called law enforcement, right? So, but as I started doing this profession, I started realizing the many opportunities I had to help others who didn't realize that with the laws, how it applied to them. I also start realizing this whole good thing that I thought an officer should be didn't really exist with everyone. And so that became a motivating factor for me to say, wait a second, if you're standing next to me and you're not abiding by these laws and rules, I have a problem with that. And so that became another passion for me, but try to make sure the people who wore this uniform had the trust the community deserved, and had the trust from me to say, no, I trust you to do the right thing no matter what. So being able to make sure as I went up through leadership that we were doing this profession and representing well was another passion. So what motivated me, bottom line, I had to eat. And then after I realized, you know what, this career, there's no way me being an attorney would have been able to expose me with so many amazing people, amazing opportunities, and it's still the innovative opportunities that for this profession in the future are limitless. So I don't think I would have been able to have that in whatever aspect of attorney had I chosen to go that route. So
funny you mentioned what motivated you. You said you had to eat. And sometimes
right.
people tell me, well, women don't want these jobs. And I'm like, why wouldn't a woman want a job that pays well, that has job security, a pension? Like, why wouldn't they? There's a bunch of research, right, about what women bring to these careers and the positive outcomes that can be achieved by increasing the representation of women. How do you approach your decision making in high stress situations And can you provide an example from your career where being who you are is what contributed to that decision making and how you made decisions?
So, so how I make decisions, that was a definite evolution, right? And that was a definite training component. We've had, I started with the city of Atlanta, where protests exist, where challenges exist in all type of ways. And so when you have to respond quickly, you're going to make mistakes, you're going to learn off those mistakes. So I had to, in leadership, start studying what is the best way to make critical decisions in high manner. So the more and more I've learned, you practice it, the easier it becomes. So the first thing that I assess really quickly is there a law or a policy that is going to help me make this decision, whatever decision I have to make? We can check that off the list. Then the next thing is the most important thing is what's the impact to the either internal or external personnel component, the people, right? How is it going to impact the people that work with me or the people that we're serving? That's another component, whatever the decision-making crisis impact. Then I look at the safety component. How safe is this? How safe are the people who are working and the people we're serving? Then, of course, you have a budgetary component. Is it going to cost me? What's it going to cost the organization? What's it going to cost us? Do we have the funding for different things on making those decisions? Then, of course, then the next thing I go to, you got to think about this. There's a political component. And depending on where your city is or your governmental entity is, political decisions change and how the community wants things to be represented by the law enforcement in that environment. So, and then let me think, what's another thing? The last thing, or critical, I really got to think, is there a personal element that's going to affect my decision? Is there a personal relationship that may have me leaning another way that I need to really look internal and say, you know what, am I making this decision because it personally impacts me, or that person or thing really connects to me, or is it really I would do the same thing consistently no matter what? Because if there's a personal element of it, then I really probably need to have someone else join in that decision. So when you do that over and over again, it starts becoming easy. You start running down a list. What's the law? What's the policy? What's the personnel? And then you're able to quickly make crisis decisions. An example, you asked for it. I think because I had going through Atlanta, we had multiple protests from all the way back in the day with Rodney King, or we had an event called Freaknik where it was like a whole lot of crowd. We had to manage crowd. We had to be responsive. So by the time we had to go through training, we had all type of training, protest training, how you lock it down, how you get people out of protest. When 2020 happened and I was the chief of police in Fayetteville, Fayetteville had, and I didn't find this out till afterwards, Fayetteville had never had a protest happen in their city. They had been practicing responding to protests with other cities within the last 4 to 5 years. They had been responding, but I did not know they had never had a response to a protest. And not a small protest, a protest where people are upset, destruction may happen. So when 2020 happened, in my mind, I got a phone call from the community that said, you may not know this is about to happen. It was on a weekend. So I had to go into reactionary critical assessment mode. I had to start calling up my command staff, get ready, all hands on deck. And their response was like, well, why? We'll be okay. I'm like, no, you don't get it. Start, prepare all of our vehicles, because that's the first thing they're going to target. They're going to try to destroy anything, any vehicles. Let's see how we can get people in. Let's start preparing holistically how we're going to respond. So being able to apply the history of what happens, what I've seen happen in other cities, the cities that I'm involved in, really played a quick role when the decision had to happen in responses. So when destruction happened on different levels, how I take care of the people, how you sustain it, how you maintain the longevity of it, asking after that, going to the mayor and saying, I need a curfew, because that's going to help us navigate the next couple of days with the personnel we have. So all those decisions that you learn along the way, that you also can watch along the way. Because one thing that I was sharing before it hit our city, it was already happening in other cities. So trying to tell my command staff, look, watch what's happening there, because if it comes here, you're going to learn off those lessons. You're going to be able to prepare your police department for if a fire is going to happen there. You're going to prepare your police department if they try to overtake it. So it's real easy to be able to study what happens in other communities, just to start thinking about it, to have conversations, and then truly have those conversations with your team, with the agency, get feedback. So that way they at least think about it. So if you at least think about it, and the surprise won't be so much of a surprise. It'll be different, because facing it in real life is totally different than watching the screen and being Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday morning quarterbacks. So facing it does make a difference. And then definitely having a team or volunteering to go support another agency just to get that experience is critical and crucial, to say, let me see how that happened, what played out, and then being able to have an after action report. How could we have done it better? You know, did we do it? Did we follow our policies? Do we even have policies? All those things play a role in preparing and thoughtfulness, and just imagining how can we make sure we're able to make critical decisions, and we're thinking it, and we're getting input from as many people as possible, so that we've had all the naysayers options, and then we have what's the plan to handle the situation, and we're ready to do it. So
I love all the components that you touched on, things that people, when they first start policing, they don't really consider, right? The budget, political relationships, interacting with other agencies, the law, right? And policies and how do they apply. So usually someone new will think, oh, well, what's the sexy assignment, right? Do I want to go to gangs or narcotics or street crimes? And I personally, I spent way too much time in units like that. And I didn't know to spread out and learn policy and planning and administration and the legislative process or budget, the business end of police. A lot of people don't consider. And then when you become a chief, you're like, oh, this is all brand new to me. So
right.
Expanding your roles and not just thinking of the assignments that are good to develop your policing skills, but also your management skills. So excellent points all around. Now,
let me add one other thing, Yvonne. That really plays a role in truly when we are hiring as well, who we're looking at. And we really drill down and ask them, what do you like? What do you like? You know, we understand you think this whole, I want to be a SWAT officer, I want to protect, but what else do you like to do? And being able to share with them if they like technology, or if they like to talk, if they want to be, their side gig is they do part-time movie, play and acting. Being able to understand and share with them, this profession is a business. And when you pull all the skills in this business from all the people in those roles, you can have an amazing communications unit, right? Because they understand the filming, they understand technology. Or you can have someone who loves technology and having a drone unit, and that's their specialty. They get happy, they understand the basics of this profession, but then they actually get to participate in something that they love, right? Because this profession involves everything, the relationship building, all those things.
Excellent point. And I think, you know, it's the media portrayal, right? When they show a police officer, what are they doing? They're chasing a car or effecting an arrest, but there's so many different options available within a law enforcement career. So you were the first female African-American and Hispanic police chief in Fayetteville. What unique perspectives did you bring to the role, and how did they impact your career trajectory and your leadership style?
So I think not just Fayetteville, I think every opportunity I've had, I'm the only law enforcement person in my family ever. My siblings, they're in software or IT technology. So no one. So when I'm around them or my family, I am just Gina. I'm either auntie or sister or daughter, and I play that role. I am just Gina, right? But I also understand the challenges that my family has faced. My mother came in, she's Panamanian. She didn't know how to speak English. And I knew growing up, she had challenges of being able to get a job because she had a hard accent and she had challenges. So I understood that's not right if she's treated differently and not given an opportunity with all the skills that she has coming to her. I also understood as a woman, People, even as in school, people didn't give me the same opportunities, but my dad would always enforce with all his children, 2 girls and 2 boys, you can do anything you want to. And my dad did like renovation of houses. So he used his children as, there was no real labor laws. So we were the laborers of, so I knew how to do hammering, drywalling, and stuff that he had us working doing. And we played sports. So also seeing how people were treated differently, coming up in that day and age, that was very important for me to always stand up and advocate for civil rights, advocate for everyone's rights. I hated bullies. I think growing up young and not realizing we were speaking Spanglish and being criticized because growing up, no one else speaks Spanish, and we trying to push that down because how we were treated. So I realized early on, no matter where I was going to listen because I know how I was treated, how my family was treated, and I would never want anyone else to be treated like that. So the perspective I think that I brought that was different was realizing my demographics was spanned at least 3 different ones, but I was always open to any new one. It's always interesting to me to learn about someone, who they are, their heritage, what their challenges are, because everyone's challenges are inspirational to me, because there are some that I could never have imagined not having 2 parents, right? Having one parent and struggling, it's a big challenge, and it's inspirational to me because they come through different things that others may not be exposed to. So I think being able to bring that perspective of listening and understanding and trying to help others realize everyone has a voice and we need to listen. Mind you, we're going to try to follow the law. We're going to make sure everyone's treated fairly. But I think because I had that ingrained in me so young and at every level, now mind you, it didn't work out well as a young officer because I spoke up probably more often than needed. And I probably wasn't the best yes, sir, or yes, ma'am. And I'm being very honest because I was defiant because I knew policy. And I would challenge my supervisors that did not know policy. And we go tit for tat. But that was the little butt in me. I had to grow up and realize that's not right. You shouldn't be doing that. You should be helping the people, even if it is your supervisors who don't know, help them learn. But I'm going to be honest with you. Remember, you can ask me, I'm going to be honest. I know the challenge that I had, that I gave other people, but then I had to turn that around and say, no, let me make this right. Let me do the right thing and not just be a pain in my supervisor's side.
I love that your dad brought the boys and the girls in to be the free labor for the construction, right? Because he didn't establish the sense of gender norms for you. So how do you think that with that experience that led for you to advocate for diversity or an inclusion within your department or the broader law enforcement community?
So being behind the scenes, what I was able to see, when I wanted to apply, so before I was 10 years on Atlanta, before I was even a sergeant, I worked vice the gang unit in the field, and I loved it. It enabled me I had a daughter at the time, to be able to have a schedule and get consistent with that. But then I realized when it was time for me to want to go to another unit, it was either who you knew or who their friends were, right? There was no fair process in order to go to a unit. So you had to either know someone or a friend be brought. It was no system. Then going to another agency, being able to see how they offer opportunities for people to go to specialized units. And I was able to also see how it was subjective. Like if you have the same unit interviewing the same people, you're going to get the same element. Making it fair, make sure you have diversity coming into a unit, making that unit stronger, making that unit not have a weak link. Do they have the aspect of book smarts, physical strength, and emotional strength? All those 3 together. You can't, if you just have a whole unit of all brute strong strength, you're gonna miss on the academics, you're gonna miss on the emotional intelligence component. If you have just a whole unit of emotional intelligent people, you're gonna need somebody that's strong and somebody who have academics. So being able to once I got in a position and asked the questions and create systems or processes inside an organization that keep it as fair as possible, you know, whether it's a blind assessment, right, with just numbers and you can't see who the person is until the last minute, changes up scoring, changes up who actually gets chosen on a fair system. So I think being able to see it in that component, and then exposing other unit members to there are other people who can do this and they actually can help you as well. They have to be look different than you, and it's okay. So I think that's where it's helped me being behind the scenes, trying to expose that for fairness and expose that for consistently of allowing people the ability to grow in this profession and not feel like they can't go anywhere in a fair process.
Yeah, I struggled with that too, in my career, where specialized assignments were based on who you knew, right? It wasn't a meritocracy. The promotional process was, and so I excelled there. I was able to fly up the ranks because it depended on how well I performed on the exam, written or verbal.
You know, Yvonne, one thing recently, I think when I started becoming also more advocating, wanting to be more involved with NAWLEE, was when I start realizing there's so many agencies that are small that might only have one woman or one minority in there. And what I can't even imagine what their challenge may be. Who do they go to for understanding? Who do they go to for mentoring that they can trust and that can understand what their challenge may be? So that's where the passion came for me to say, you know, they got to figure out ways to get help as well, to get some type of assistance, some mentorship, or some guidance, or some questions to be able to ask, and it not compromise where they are in their organization, right? You can't, if you say I need help, and then everybody in the agency knows it, and then you know that's kind of challenging as well. So
that's a great point. When I first started doing this work in 2017, I had a commander in the Iowa State Police bring his only 2 female supervisors in the entire state to New Jersey to see what I was doing. And I'm like, Lord, don't let that plane go down because it'll wipe out the whole female representation. But a lot of what they said was that for them to even see another woman in their role, they'd have to drive hours and hours on end because it's the state police. So they'd have like one in each station. So absolutely, it's really tough, and you can't just rely on female mentors or female role models when you're underrepresented. So we really need men to step up and also be mentors and allies. Now,
that's right.
When you are looking at your management, and we talked about policing being a business, it's not just patrol, it's not just solving crimes. How do you prioritize the various divisions under your command, and how do you decide how you're going to allocate resources?
Yeah, so it's very difficult at times, but it probably gets motivated like what's happening, right? The priority of personnel is always going to be number one, and safety is going to be number one. And then example, today, the debate is happening in Georgia, and the POTUS is flying in to Cobb County, probably about right now. So the planning of that.
Still making time to speak with us because you must have your hands full.
So the planning of that is a priority, right? So that puts back anything else, whether it be a budget assessment, whether it be a regular thing that policy that we need created, that brings other heighten of where's our resources, who do I call for the here right now, the one-time big thing that's happening. Everything else gets put on the back burner, but it can't be put on the back burner too long if it's at the same time a budget, the county is approving a budget proposal, right? So you got to make sure the planning is long enough ahead, far enough ahead to see it, and then start scheduling your days accordingly and your personnel. So I have, I try to do my best to have what I call one-on-ones, at least with my commanders. Although I talk to them all the time, and I'll bug them on the cell phone, I also try to schedule time to see what is their need and what are their crisis, so it can help me. I want to help you all fulfill that, and what can I do to fulfill that? So it also gauges on what their needs is determining what attention I give to a priority. Everything cannot be a priority at the same time. And just like family, you know, today's my daughter's birthday. Happy birthday, Trinity. She's not watching this, but it's a priority, right? And when you put in crucial priorities, I felt bad because I was like, oh my goodness, an hour ago I just told her happy birthday on a text, right? So I got to make it up, right? But that's a priority. But she also knows we're about to go somewhere in an hour together to celebrate. But where you put your priority is really going to be dependent on the resources, the dangers, the safety of your personnel, and then the planning, being able to truly start planning how much time you need based off of what you know. I grew up, unfortunately, a procrastinator, and I convinced myself some crazy silliness that I operate good at the last minute. Is ridiculous. I do not. But when the deadline comes, I get it done. I may sacrifice time, sleep at the time, but because of so many things going on, you do have to schedule and you do have to delegate and you do have to give people the opportunity to either fail or knock it out the box. So giving it to them and giving it to someone else that's under your command and saying, hey, if you need help, let me give you some resources to help out and guide them and let them figure it out. And then when they come back and blow it out the waters, you're like, yay. Or if they're like, okay, you need a little bit of help, try it again. And that's how you create other leaders, by giving them the opportunity to do the work that, and not taking it on yourself, realizing you cannot, as a leader, take on all your responsibilities yourself.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, giving people opportunities, giving them stretch assignments. A lot of times we don't know what kind of training we need for a leadership role. I know I didn't find out till like the last 4 years that you needed like FBI NA, or you needed Smith Senior Management Institute of Policing. So then I was scrambling towards the end of my career to make sure that I got those under my belt. So what strategies do you use to ensure continuous training and development for your officers and opportunities?
Absolutely. And I'm going to say this, there is nothing more important than training. Training for the people that work for you. And that is everyone that works for you, right? You have to think about your admin staff, because your admin staff is going to support you in every aspect. And you need to ask them, what do you want to do? And what do you need? And you start thinking of what's being offered for them. But for training for your people, from the line officer to your people that work directly under you. Sometimes even commanders under you at a higher level might say, I'm looking at the clock, I'll retire soon. Okay, but until then, what would you like, and what's going to help you take your profession in retirement to the next level? What skills do you think you would like to have? And making sure they have that opportunity to go to that training, or even bring that training to the organization. I think what I've tried to share is probably a lot cheaper to bring an entity, a high-level entity trainer to the organization, where you can train more people than just sending one person out to one specific training. Mind you, you definitely going to have to budget for the perfs or SMIP. You definitely going to have to budget kind of the time regarding NA, FBI NA, but there are other training components that are available out there for other leaders. And I'm talking about higher level leaders or executive, but along the way, I also advocate for my people to search what they want to do that's being offered out there, and then bring it or present it as an option to say, this is what I want to do, and this is how it can help our organization be successful. And then share that information, because when they are trained on highly skilled, high level, high tactical, high impact items, you have a resource, and then they teach another individual, and then you have a well-trained organization. But when you limit someone's education and training, you stifle them, first of all, and then they don't feel like they're appreciated to grow. And then they also don't feel like they have the opportunity to even advance. And then you also cannot get upset if the person that you highly train gets an offer to become someone else's chief, someone else's commander, or someone else's superstar, because they trained under your command. You need to be happy for them and excited that they also now can move on and help this profession become better and teach other leaders. So, I've often heard someone say, well, I trained them up, now they left me. Imagine had you not trained them up. You would not have been able to have an amazing organization or amazing peer to help you, because I'm sure they're learning something and bring it back to you as well. and we learn together. So I totally advocate for training. I totally advocate for assessing the individuals that work around you and with you and pushing them. A lot of times they're not going to want to go to school, finished out their degree or finished out their master's, but push them and remind them, you know, I plan on living to be past 102. That's how my grandmother was when she's passed. So I'm a little over halfway there. You know, I don't want to be stagnant doing something. I want to see something, or what else that I may want to do. So, but also make that recommendation to the people that are working for you. You know, there's no retirement rocking on the porch. You have a purpose, and you have a purpose for this community and this society to keep on giving all your knowledge and wealth to the others.
And so I think a lot of what we're talking about has to do with police culture, right? How assignments are made and training and decisions are made, and whether people think they'll have a fair shake. So how do you foster a culture of accountability and integrity within your departments?
I would say integrity and accountability is kind of easy to hold a culture like that, because that means you're going to stay consistent on evaluating and looking up when people violate policies. You also going to make sure your policies or your practices are consistent, and then those individuals have been trained on that practice or policy. But being able to make sure, one, we are consistent with, if you violate it, you got to be held accountable, and everyone accept that, right? But going towards the culture of really challenging it from the top, when you see along the way, and I always like to see recommendations when there's something discipline happens. I want to see everyone's recommendation, right? I want to see the train of thought from every level of chain of command, because that also tells you the culture on if that person either knows that individual or if they are consistent with the same recommendation for someone else. You get the opportunity also to change the culture and look at being fair and consistent, no matter who is being held accountable. And when you're able to see that, and then you are able to question the individual, whether it's a supervisor, commander, why did you make this decision on this one versus changing it for this one? Or you want to look the other way for this person. That deals with culture as well, saying, you know, we're going to do our best. We're going to make mistakes, right? We are probably the most self-investigative profession ever, because there's a standard, there's an expectation that we have to follow our policies, follow laws, but we also have to realize that we're not perfect. So giving people the ability to make mistakes and receive discipline, the least amount to change the behavior, is ideal, so that people can say, you know, I made a mistake. I'm not trying to get fired over this one mistake. I didn't know. Give them an opportunity to say, okay, and then once you know, we're going to retrain you on it. You got your discipline. Now let's get back to work. Don't hold that over their head so that they're already thinking you're treating them from that something that happened 2 years ago or 5 years ago, or they become this policy rule. You know, you forgive people, you give them grace, because once you start realizing and start looking at self-reflective, all the mistakes that I made, thank goodness I wasn't held accountable for every single one that I did, right? Everyone's got to be able to give grace, but also hold accountable for the ones that you can do retraining, or the ones you have to say, no, this is a hard discipline. We can recover, but I need you to be honest and truthful in everything that you do. That's our integrity. I'm gonna back you, and I'm gonna own, just like I'm gonna own you made a mistake. It's not the end all to be all. You can recover from it. Now let's move forward and try to get better as a culture.
Those are excellent points. We were chatting before we got on the webinar about how it's viewed when a male a leader makes a mistake versus how a female leader is held. Like, she's like, oh, well, we gave a woman an opportunity and she messed up. So back to the guys, right? I don't know how many men have screwed up, right? Giving people grace and allowing them to grow in their roles and examining your data points, right? Who are you rewarding? Who are you disciplining? Is it equitable? Is it, you know, on par with each other, right? So those are great points and things that organizations like NAWLEE, the National Association of Women in Law Enforcement, have worked on to improve. Now, you have also, your president, congrats on being elected as a president this year. And also you're a chair of the American Bar Association Criminal Justice Law Enforcement Committee. So I see that you really diversified as far as your experience, not just sticking to law enforcement, but also going to these different spaces. How do you think that that's influenced your work or your perspective? How important is to do that?
It is absolutely important. Remember, I said I love people and I love learning from people. Leadership spans the spectrum of every profession, right? They're going to have their challenges no matter what profession you take, whether it's education or the healthcare or the arts. You know, you're going to have leaders stand on major components. It's going to be consistent in how they treat people and what they do. But being able to understand what someone else is doing also helps us in our profession. We spend, like, if you are able to go, if you're in especially executive, but you can do it at any level, pay attention to your local, who you work for, governmental entity. When I say pay attention, if you cannot go to a council meeting, you can watch it being recorded. You can understand every element, whether it be streets, whether it be water, whether it be communications or economic development, every part of a component of a city. And those are different engineering components impact law enforcement. When they're building a new community, when they're building another street, how the economic development of another part of the community is going to be developed impacts this profession. When we're paying attention and understand the community's high push button or their crisis, it helps us understand when it's time for us to come in that community, what the issues are. So being able to also span and understand others makes you a lot more diverse as an individual, but definitely in this profession. You can have a conversation with someone by asking them what do they like and what's their passion. You have people in school going to education. It is not just I'm a law enforcement officer and I'm enforcing the law. You're set up to say I want to help people. Learning about people and the different elements of what they want to do and what makes them smile is only going to help you when it's time to have a conversation with the people in your community. So when you can broaden your spectrum of sitting on a committee, they're looking for your leadership component. They're looking for your experience as well to say, well, no, let me tell you what happens when officers get exposed to this type of environment. You're also educating other realms, other professions on the perspective of a law enforcement officer. You're giving it from the nuts and bolts, the real life experience of an officer's experience, which educates them, which educates the community and this world one by one about what we do, the challenges that we face, and the ability to grow together. Because ultimately, like I said, I'm the only one. My baby, who's 23 today, is a teacher. She's an elementary school teacher, and my oldest is an esthetician. But my daughters probably know more about constitutional policing than any probably basic officer because they've been around me and they understand the why, because they've had to sacrifice when I'm not around. I usually tell them, this is what I'm challenged with. This is why I'm doing it. So they understand when crisis is happening, what I'm doing for this profession. So they understand what to do when they face a challenge in law enforcement. They don't want to be a law enforcement officer, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with them wanting to do what they love to do, but they also understand it because they've grown up with a mom all their lives in this profession.
I love that. And a lot of what you mentioned, the women coming onto a male dominant environment might not realize the importance of what you just talked about, right? Being able to network, being able to leverage resources and expertise, knowing how processes work within a city council meeting, who are the influencers and how do they influence people. So important. And a lot of times when you don't have a mentor, you don't know that that's what you should be learning along this process because it's so important to leadership. I have one more question for you. So if anyone has any questions, please drop them in the box. I see that we have one already. So my last question for you will be, how do you envision the future of women in law enforcement and what do you think needs to happen for our progress to continue?
So I envision many great things happening. I think watching it This is over 35 years, watching the evolution, watching the profession become so professional and our standards changing. For women, it's only going to go up because we're going to do the work. But for the profession as a whole, making sure it is evolving to listening to more of a collaborative community. You know, community policing truly is about every single component of the community playing a role about its safety, how it plays a role from education, how does it play a role? We're just a component. We are not the drivers of community policing. We're just one spoke in that whole wheel of engagement and relationship building and safety for us all. So I see it evolving to even being more inclusive. I see it evolving to being more diverse, more different trains of thoughts because to address the challenges of our community as a whole, of our society. I see it a lot more people getting engaged. I see a lot more diversity coming into in this profession, which is amazing because one, having different people, you get to learn so many different things, and it just keeps you on your toes. So I just see this profession becoming even more diverse and even more professional. So it's exciting to me.
All right, so now we have some pretty good questions in the chat here. So the first is, how'd you stay motivated in environments where decisions about your career trajectory or what opportunities you were going to get weren't based on merit? How did you stay motivated when it impacts directly the promotional process and your career development?
So one, I'm very competitive, but at the same time, it's not a perfect. Sometimes I had bad days. Sometimes I had bad times. And then there were times that I had to, life happens, you know, life is going to happen to you. And how you navigate through that is having a strong foundational of family, strong foundation of faith, and knowing that that title does not define who you are. I'm a strong believer on God's will. So it may not have been the position I needed at that time, but if I didn't get it, then make the best of what I'm doing right now and learn as much as I can in the positions that I hold. I said a lot of yeses to when I was asked to take over an assignment or do an assignment. And those yeses probably was more work than my counterpart that was doing. I still did it. I was able to learn. And at the end, what you become is more well-versed, more well-educated than your counterpart. So by the time it is able for you to do that promotion, you undoubtedly are not only overqualified, they're going to have to come out the woodwork if it's internal to say why you're not chosen. But I truly also believe once you're chosen for that opportunity and you work and flourish, then you're going to be in demand. Then they're going to be like, no, I need that person. I need that person to come because they're not only proactive working, but they also are relationship building. They're not being an a-hole. Remember I said early on, I was probably an a-hole a little bit. They've changed and really are more collaborative. They're really listening and trying to say, how do we make sure we're being fair as possible? But you will have challenges. I'm not saying you're not going to have to. You just have to accept them and say, what do I do to overcome that? And how do I stay motivated? I stay motivated by other people because somebody else is always going to have a worse time than you, a bigger challenge than you, and you can help someone else. So if you stay motivated helping other people, that distracts from the challenge that you're facing.
I think that's a good segue to the next question. So they're asking, how do you incorporate mental health and wellness programs within an agency, and how does that help with work-life balance? I love that you mentioned your daughters. You have two, I have three. And I don't like to ask people about their families because men have families and no one asks them, well, what are you doing with the kids, right? But as far as mental health and wellness and that getting that work-life balance, how did you get that achieved?
So I'm going to say this, that was one of my study things in a master's, asking about work-life balance, and I would watch other people, what they call us be workaholics, right? And even to the extent I could have that title, but when I really evaluated it, I don't think if there's a balance. I think at certain times people, you're going to have to give and take it, and more attention may be given to my daughters, and I have to tell the job, you know, when my oldest at 9 years old had a very bad accident, she was hospitalized for 12 days. I didn't even, I'm like, y'all figure it out. I'm not working. And then I was out of work for taking care of her for 6 weeks, right? That's not my priority. She's my priority. The balance comes in when you're able to say there are certain needs, and it's not going to be a balance in my perspective. But then at the same time, if you're doing what you love, if you're doing part of your passion, right? Um, you don't question when artists want to be full-time artists, right? And they love that they're putting all their energy into that. If this is what you want to do, there is definitely balance on family and taking care of yourself. And mental, and thank you for the mental health issue. As we've evolved, we are absolutely, as a profession, are going to have to normalize the impact of mental health on us as a profession. You cannot ignore it. We cannot ignore it any longer, because we see so much that others will never see, and we can't push it down. We cannot ignore it. We have to deal with it. And as you deal with it, the first thing is acknowledging is it impacts me. I have been my last, I went through a divorce crisis at work happening, divorce happening, and I'm also, my body literally starts shutting down for stress. In my mind, I got dressed every day, I smiled every day, I drove to work, but my body starts shutting down to the point where I went to a doctor's visit, and a doctor admitted me because she said, "We don't know what's happening, but your body is shutting down." My mind was like, "No, I'm good, I'm good." But that's the stress that I had to realize that I was taking in, and I was lying to myself saying that I didn't need to get help or get rest or re-energize or really deal with. That was something bad that happened. I'm sure people can remember probably the worst death that they got exposed to, or a bad crisis. They see a family hurting. You can't just internalize that and ignore it. You have to process it, and you have to have ways of process it. And in this profession, we are going to have to automatically implement those opportunities. How I did it in the past, especially it notated when 2020 happened for my previous agency, I went and got funding for mandatory annual 2 days a year. Every employee go see a counselor, and I don't care what you talk about there, but go see there. And at times the feedback was they were mad. You can't make me go see a counselor. They were mad. And I'm like, be mad at me. It's okay. Then we would have people secretly come back to me and say, "Thank you. Don't tell nobody, but thank you for making me go. I didn't realize I needed help, but I won't tell nobody that." Multiple people kept saying that they needed that outlet to be able to tell their supervisor, "She's making me go to counseling. I'll see you later." Then once they get there, they're getting the help they need. We absolutely have to normalize this. We have to normalize to say, you need to talk to people. And if you don't have a close person that is level-headed enough to tell you, okay, your stuff stinks, or you need other help, then we're going to have the crisis of suicide in this profession over and over again, because we think it's not strong to go and say you need help. Everybody needs help. Everybody needs to understand you don't know what you don't know. You don't know internally, mentally, what's happening to you when you see things, when you see trauma, when you see triggers, when you try to push it down and ignore it. You just don't know it. And when we get to the point where we're able to normalize, we need help, and it's okay to go get help. And it's part of the plan. When we have a crisis, or when the SWAT team sees something tragic, we mandatory go send them for counseling. That's part of the plan. You know it's going to happen. You know it's for your benefit, and then they're able to share how they expect the help to come, so that when new officers come on, and it's kind of good that the new officers, the younger generations, are okay with counseling. So we just have to make sure everyone is starting to normalize for this profession the help that we need to address mental health, self-care, taking care of yourself healthy. You absolutely have to take care of yourself health-wise, because the stress comes out in so many different ways. So that is an absolute must for us in this profession.
Excellent points. I mean, there've been a few years where more officers have died by suicide than killed in the line of duty, and it's that stigma, right? So being able to talk about it, having the resources available are really great traits from your leadership. So thank you for that. Another question here. The person with 26 years on the job says that the culture within their agency has been that it's frowned upon, or there's been criticism for women, supporting women through organized groups. And though there have been male allies who've offered mentors, she understands the challenges and wants to know, how do you foster women mentoring women within your department, and having it not have the stigma that's sometimes associated with having identity groups, like for women or for officers of color.
Yeah, so I understand the question. Let me talk about my agency. I happen to be blessed to be working for a sheriff that not only has a well diverse command staff, but an agency of women. He also is a NAWLEE member. He also is an advocate for women. His number one, his chief deputy and myself are both women. So he has ranking a colonel, a lieutenant colonel, a major. He has ranking of women, right? So in my organizations, I'm working for a leader who understands the importance of diversity and people and having women in the field. Now, to the question of people who frown upon that, to say, why are you promoting women supporting other women? I would say this question: why is that a problem? You know, I look at that as a gaslighting to try to make you feel guilty for supporting yourself. We're supporting ourselves. I would want that male or whoever the men are to support themselves, right? Why are you mad that other women are supporting other women, especially when we're telling you over and over again, they're facing challenges, they're facing issues. And one way to do it also is to take those individuals, male, and put them in a room of all women and then ask them, how do you feel? And be honest, and or just to watch them. They will feel like they're alone. They'll be afraid to speak up. They'll be afraid that somebody's going to criticize them. I've done it before. That's the first thing they'll say. And nothing has happened besides they're all law enforcement women, and the men become the minority. And then they try to figure out, I might say the wrong thing. I'm a little uncomfortable. Why are you uncomfortable? No one's treated you differently yet. So being able to share this should not be an issue with you supporting women, supporting other women. I remember when I was in SMIP trying to share the importance of women supporting other women. There was a male in the class, and he said, you know what, I don't think there's that many issues. I don't not support women. And then I asked him a question. I said, hey, do you have children? He's like, yeah. I said, do you have any daughters? He's like, yeah, I have like a 5-year-old. I said, and I know you probably love your daughter, but if you don't prepare your 5-year-old for her future, that she will face challenges, she will be discriminated, they will not give her opportunities. If you don't prepare her for that, not saying it's a crutch, not to say fight it, prepare her, then she will not be able to be as successful as you want her to be. He came to me afterwards and he was like, oh my goodness, I never thought of it like that. That's my baby. I want to make sure she's ready to go. She's prepared. She has everything she needs. So when it happens, she knows it's happening and she knows how to overcome it, right? So the ones that are up there that's going to say, oh, why are you women supporting other women? Why not? Why is it hurting you? No one should be hurting you, but we should be helping each other. When I went to the NA Academy, and I was already exposed to other women in my profession, but seeing other women also having the same stories, the same challenges, it made me, one, re-energize to say, I'm not out here by myself. Oh my goodness. Because a lot of times you feel like you're by yourself, and it's very difficult to share that. And you think it's a weakness, but it's not a weakness, because the whole time you're telling yourself, I'm just like men, when we're not. We're different. We're so diverse, and we can bring inclusive opportunities in for others, and we're welcoming and we're listening. So we're not the same, and it's good. I'm still tough. I like to fight. I like to shoot. I'm over tactical. What are we talking about? What are these issues that prevent me to be just as valuable as a woman and be able to mentor? I have many mentors that are men, right? Many mentors in many positions I would not have been able to have had that a male mentor not said, I'm going to help you get in this position and teach you. You need to be a little more patient, Gina. You might not need to speak up so much, and me know, okay, they're coming from the heart and want to help me in that aspect. But yeah, there's going to be gaslighting happen, but challenge it. Say, you know what, if it hurts you, please share with me that it's hurting you, that we are supporting each other. Tell me how it's hurting, because I don't want to hurt you. And maybe that's a topic we can address during our NAWLEE conference. Maybe you can come on and we can talk about it. Let me invite you. We're inclusive. You too can be a member of NAWLEE, right?
Men attend the conference. So I know you
Yeah.
have the presidential debate tonight that you're getting ready for. We have a few more questions. Do you have time for one from Scotland?
Yes. Hey, Scotland.
Okay, so from Scotland, what advice would you give when an adverse, sexist, or misogynistic situation presents and gains external media attention to support your officers and staff through the situation?
So for us, Scotland, in the US, we have basic standard laws that help us. And my first advice, no matter where you are, is to know the federal laws or the laws that exist on the books to protect any type of sexual harassment and sexual or hostile work environment. By laws, there are certain things you need to do. And consistently, you're able to say, I am going to follow the law and support this individual who's making a claim, male or female, follow it with a fact-finding investigation to be fair, hold whoever it is accountable for the action, learn from across the board, whether it be retraining the whole organization to remind them this is an unacceptable behavior. You don't want to go into any working environment where you feel like you're uncomfortable by the person you're working with. No one wants to be in that type of environment. You're never going to be able to flourish. And confidently in the public, you stand on, you have to, in this position also, as you go up the ranks, you have to be willing to say, if you terminate me for doing the right thing and standing on policy and procedure, then evidently God's going to have another job for me, because I'm going to stand on standing up for the employee, the right thing, no matter who does the violation or breaks the law. And you got to be confident enough to do that and accept that. But you know, in this position, we're going to be in the public eye no matter what we do. This is what we signed up. We can't avoid it. Just be prepared, take practice over and over again, but know the laws and know your policies and practice them. You can practice them with a peer. Get together with another person and say, if this scenario happened, how would you react? And practice that as a supervisor, as a peer, or even as an officer, right? You have a challenged supervisor. Get another peer that you trust and say, I want to bring this to their attention. How should I do that? Go behind the scenes and practice. Do a role play. Say, if they say this, what can I say legally within policy and not get triggered, right? And practice that as how am I going to handle the situation when I'm faced with it? Have someone that you could trust and do a round table of role playing so that you're prepared for whatever they may say. You have the response that is legal, that is confident, and that you push down the nervousness of confronting, because no, confrontation is something that you're going to have to face in this profession, internally within an organization and externally. Being able to be competent about what your knowledge is going to help you along the way. And then if you can practice that with some friends, say, well, if they say this, what should I say? Well, if they say this, what should, and then you're like, okay, now I'm prepared for anything that comes up.
So I know you have a busy day. I want to thank you so much for making time to meet with us, though you're on the national stage tonight with the presidential debate happening in Atlanta. And happy birthday, Trinity. Thank you so much. Any closing comments?
No, just thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to share. And if you have the chat, you or Tanya, and someone wants to ask a question, I'll be happy to respond to them. Please give them, they have my email, they have my NAWLEE email as far as president@nawlee.org. And they have my work email, or you can give it to me. I'll try to respond to them or give them a response to the best of my opinion, or any type of help. If I don't know, I'll find a resource of who might know it. So, but thank you for this opportunity for sharing. I love the conversation, and that's it.
Thank you so much. Tanya? Any closing comments, Tanya?
Nope. Thanks so much, Chief. It's, always great to see you, and thanks for giving your time to us today. Best of luck tonight, although I know that's a bad thing to say in law enforcement, but I will copy some additional questions for you and send them your way. And we just really appreciate it, and for you making the time for us today, and all the work that you do to support women in policing.